So he's now has 30. There's 3 players, Austin Eckler, Brian Westbrook, and James Brooke, and now also Christian McCaffrey, all have 30 receiving touchdowns as running backs. That's only 6 away from the record held by Marshall Faulk. All right, welcome to this episode of Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and we're looking at Week 2. We're going to look at the first 9 games of Week 2. We've already looked at the Thursday night game. We did that on Friday as we previewed some of the games as well. So you can catch that if you want to hear about that game. But we're going to look at, these will all be the 1 o'clock Sunday games, 1 o'clock Eastern time. So that's what we're going to look at today. And then Tuesday, tomorrow, I will wrap up the rest of the Sunday games plus the Monday night games. And there are 2 Monday night games tonight. So gives us 2 games to enjoy. So saying that, let's get started. First game up. The Los Angeles Rams at the Tennessee Titans. The Rams won this game 33-19. Good win for the Rams. I will say Tennessee, not that it's not a good team, but they had a lot of heart, a lot of effort, but just could not keep up with Matthew Stafford and the Rams. Let's look at the numbers. For the team-wise, the Rams really dominated as far as total net yards with 439 yards to 252 for Tennessee. Had a really good rushing game, 149 yards rushing, 6-yard average for the Rams. And then in the passing game, net yards passing, 290 for the Rams, 143 for Tennessee. They both threw 33 passes, but Stafford right now, and we'll look at this, just does a lot more with every pass than Cam Ward does at this point in time. Cam Ward sacked 5 times for 32 yards. Fortunately, as Stafford only sacked once, if you're, as I do, I'm just considering his back all the time, so only 1 sack for him. Looking at some of the other numbers, Tennessee, they're just, they need a lot of work. 10 penalties, had a fumble, interception. So made some mistakes, which they can't make when you're playing a good team. They actually had more total plays than the Rams, but just didn't do the same with them. And both teams had the ball for basically 30 minutes. Very close as far as that goes. Now looking at these 2 quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford was 23 of 33 for 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interceptions. Cam Ward was 19 for 33 for 175 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. But here's the big difference. If you break down their passes, Cam Ward made 1 attempt of a pass over 20 yards and did not complete it. Only 1 attempt. I did go 4 out of 9 from 10 to 20 yards in that range, but most of his passes were under 10 yards. Now, on the other hand, when you look at Stafford was 3 out of 4 on passes over 20 yards. Really excellent there. 3 out of 4 versus 0 out of 1 for Cam Ward. So it's a huge difference. And then from 10 to 20 yards, he also was 5 out of 10. So 50% there compared to the 4 out of 9 for Cam Ward. So he just threw the ball down the field a lot more, did a lot more with the same number of pass attempts, completed 4 more, but he completed 4 more for 123 extra yards. So it's a huge difference as far as the passing game goes for the 2 teams. Now, Stafford has some really good receivers, so that makes a huge difference. But that was one of the big differences I noticed in this game, was just how the passes were distributed. Now in the running game for the Rams, it was Kyren Williams with 17 carries for 66 yards, 3.88 yard average, no touchdowns. Puka Nacua had one rush for 45 yards. That was huge. Touchdown run, which was amazing run, because he looked like he was all bottled up right off the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden he's popped out the other end and he's running for a touchdown. It was a crazy play. Now, Blake Corum had 5 carries for 44 yards for 8.8 yard average and a touchdown, which really hurts if you're a fantasy holder of Kyren Williams. It really hurts your numbers when it's Blake Corum who gets the touchdown. Matthew Stafford, 2 carries for -6 yards. Now, for Tennessee, it was Tony Pollard had a good game. And if they could have just hung in the game, he probably would have even had more carries. But he had 20 carries for 92 yards, a 4.6 yard average. His longest carry was only 10 yards, though. But so really, he's averaging over 4.5 yards a carry, and nothing's too long, which isn't skewing the numbers, is what I'm kind of getting at. And then DK had 2 carries for 9 yards, and Cameron Ward had 4 carries for 8 yards. So really, it was Tony Pollard was the big running back for Tennessee here, and Kyren Williams dominated on 17 carries for Kyren Williams on 25 rushing attempts, and Tony Pollard 20 carries out of the total 26 carries. So those two guys really cemented their positions. At least now, we'll have to keep an eye on Blake Corum as far as that goes for Williams, though. Now, in the wide receivers and receiver department, Puka Nacua, 8 receptions for 91 yards on 9 targets. So 8 out of 9 targets, no touchdowns. Devontae Lewis showed up here, 6 catches on 13 targets. He was targeted 13 times, had 6 catches for 106 yards. So really good, and 1 touchdown. Like I said, if you have him, he's somebody that really can get the touchdowns for you. He's in the top 10 all-time in NFL history for touchdown receptions. Tyler Higbee, 4 catches on 4 targets for 37 yards. Jordan Whittington, 2 catches for 42 yards. And then Kyren Williams did have 2 catches for 14 yards. So he ended up touching the ball 19 times in this game, which is good. You like to see if he's your number one running back, 20 touches in a game. So he almost got there. Unfortunately, if he was your guy, he just didn't produce a touchdown. But maybe next week. He's usually fairly good at producing touchdowns. And then one more, Davis Allen did have 1 catch for 8 yards, and that was for a touchdown. So that was the wrap up on that. Now, it's interesting to look at the 2 running backs. Kyren Williams, 17 carries for 66 yards, almost all on the outside. Only had 13 yards running up the middle. On the other hand, Tony Pollard had most of his yards up the middle on the right side, and almost all but 12 of his yards running right. So it's interesting to see how the 2 players run. Kyren Williams definitely is trying to bounce it out, while Tony Pollard does not mind going up the middle. All right. On defense, anybody for the Rams? They did have 5 sacks. That's right, 5 sacks. Pretty impressive there. With Byron Young having 2 of the sacks. There's 3 guys had 1. So really produced pretty well there. And only 1 sack. Amani Hooker sacked Stafford 1 time. All right, so that's the game. Now, looking at the numbers here, and I'll do this first, the next games, but for the Rams, they now lead this series with Tennessee 9-6. And in this game, Matthew Stafford did throw 2 touchdown passes. So he passed, as far as the Rams go, he passed Bob Waterfield to move into 7th all-time in passing TDs with 98. Next up for him will be Kurt Warner, who's 6th all time for the Rams with 102. So he needs 4 more touchdowns to tie Kurt Warner, 5 to move into 6th all time. And, he'd have to play another year, which I just don't see that. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. We'll see at the end of the year. But Roman Gabriel has 154 touchdown passes to lead the Rams all time. Now, in the NFL as a whole, Matthew Stafford now is 1 touchdown away from Matt Ryan. Matthew Stafford, with those 2 touchdowns, now has 380 touchdown passes altogether. Matt Ryan has 381, so he'll be looking to pass him next week. All right, let's go to game 2. New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. This was a crazy game. I wouldn't have expected this score. The Cowboys won the game 40-37. It was quite a game. Let me find that game here. All right, let's look at that game here. Get this up here. I got to get these games up here. All right, let's start with just the overall numbers and then come back to it. So Dallas now leads this series 78-47 with 2 ties. So big lead for Dallas here. Now in this game, Dak Prescott threw 2 touchdowns. We'll look at that in a minute to move into a tie for 2nd all time in Cowboys history as far as touchdowns go with 259. He's tied now with Troy Aikman, who played in the 90s predominantly. He was tied going into the game with Don Meredith for 4th and now has moved all the way up into a tie for 2nd. So a couple more years, depending on how many touchdowns he has this year, the number 1 man is Roger Staubach with 313. So that's actually the next person because Dak Prescott's now tied for 2nd. Now, on the other side, for the Giants, Russell Wilson, he was in 4th place in sacks in the NFL history with 562. He was sacked 3 times in this game to move into a tie for 3rd all-time in NFL history with Tom Brady with 565 sacks. So next up for him in this bad category is Fran Tarkenton, who was sacked 570 times. He's all-time 2nd leading person as far as being sacked goes. Now let's look at the game. Like I said, it was 40-37 Dallas. Really a crazy game. I mean, it was a back and forth game. Halftime, it was only 13-10. And then the 4th quarter, it was just a huge breakout. And actually it ended up in overtime when Dallas pulled this one out. This was in Dallas. So Giants really put up a tough game. And unfortunately for them, they're 0-2 though. So despite the effort, they were unable to come up with the win. And we'll look at the numbers on this game. It was incredible. So in the game, a lot of yardage here. First downs, Dallas had 32 first downs. Giants had 22. But in the total net yards, Giants had 506 net yards versus Dallas's 478. So honestly, I thought Giants defense was a little better than that, but it was incredible. Rushing, and you'll see this is most of the Giants yards were in the air. Net yards rushing, 84 for the Giants, 135 for Dallas. So most of the yardage came in the passing game. The net yards passing for the Giants were 422, 343 for Dallas. So this ball was flying around in this game. It was quite a game. Now, on the negative side, both teams were horrible. The Dallas, you'd think 12 penalties for 106 yards is bad, but then you look at the Giants, 14 penalties for 160 yards. And amazingly, they almost won this game. 14 penalties, 160 yards. That's terrible. You just can't, you can't do that and win. Both teams had an interceptions and a fumble, but didn't lose the fumbles. Just unbelievable. Dallas did have the ball for almost 37 and a half minutes to 32 and a half for the Giants. Now, remember, there's overtime into this. That's why these two totals equal out to more than 60 minutes. Now, looking at the quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, 30 attempts, 30 completions on 41 attempts for 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had a quarterback rating of 123. Very good game for him. Really, if you saw him last week, you thought he probably needs to hang it up. Then he comes out with a game, throws for 450 yards. Incredible. So it really goes to show one more game how a game can make a difference. And obviously defenses do too. Now for Dallas, Dak Prescott threw the ball 38 completions on 52 attempts, so not quite as efficient, not even really close as Russell Wilson was, but he threw for 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception himself. Both quarterbacks were sacked 3 times. Dak Prescott ended up with a quarterback rating of 96.7. So really, Russell Wilson had a great game, probably outplayed Dak Prescott, but did not come up with a win. Now, when we're looking at these two quarterbacks, again, here's an interesting reason why. Passes over for Dak Prescott, passes over 20 yards. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 for him. So really, he was throwing the ball underneath predominantly. He did between 10 and 20 yards. He was 8 for 12. So pretty good there, 8 out of 12. But over 20 yards, just not getting him down the field. Really a ton of passes. He was perfect. Passes, around the line of scrimmage or under. Obviously, you're going to be pretty good there. You should be. I mean, he was perfect. Like I said, 12 out of 12. But these are passes all, dumps off below the line of scrimmage. So really interesting play selection here. Now, on the other hand, Russell Wilson does like to heave the ball, which is why you get him up to 450 yards. And he threw 11 passes out of 30 completions and 41 attempts. He was 7 out of 11 for passes over 20 yards. So really good. Now the one interception he did have was on a pass over 20 yards. So, you maybe chalk it up to somewhat of a punt, I guess. Now, yeah, I mean, a lot of his yards, he had well over 250 yards over on passes over 20 yards. So he really racked it up there. Only 5 passes, all completions for passes that are at the line of scrimmage or below. So really, they were pushing the ball down the field a lot more than Dallas was. Now, looking at the running backs, Tyrone Tracy, if you had him, you might have to think about what's going to be his future, and same with Devin Singletary. But in this game for the Giants, Cameron Scatabo, 11 carries for 45 yards for a 4.1 yard average. He did have the 1 rushing touchdown. Russell Wilson, 3 carries for 23 yards. Tyrone Tracy, 5 carries, 15 yards. So Cameron Scatabo dominated in the running game. They only had 21 attempts in the whole game. Scatabo had 11 of them. Devin Singletary, 1 carry, and Jackson Dart did come in and had 1 carry for -3. Now for Dallas, I was down on this Dallas Cowboys running game, but Javonte Williams has come through these last 2 games, so he may be he's definitely the guy for Dallas, and he may be somebody you want on your fantasy team as well. But Javonte Williams, 18 carries for 97 yards, a 5.4 yard average. He did have a 30-yard run, and he had 1 touchdown. So pretty good game for him. Dak Prescott had 3 carries for 17 yards. Miles Sanders, the backup, 5 for 15 for obviously 3 yards. He did have a rushing touchdown. So if you happen to have him, of course, if you had Javonte Williams, you don't like Miles Sanders coming in there and grabbing one of the touchdowns. And then Kevontae Turpin had 2 carries for 6 yards. So good game for Williams And Scatterbo, we'll have to watch the Giants and see if he will be the number one running back now. It's hard to know at this point yet. Now, if you had Malik Neighbors, you're thrilled. Malik Neighbors, 9 receptions for 167 yards, averaged over 18.5 yards a catch, had 2 touchdowns. One was a 48-yard bomb. Really great game. 9 receptions, like I said, on 13 targets. So he dominated, as well as did Wan'Dale Robinson. He's a good pickup. You probably find him in some leagues still. He had 8 receptions for 142 yards, 1 for 50 yards. So big game for him as well. And he also had a touchdown pass. So he had 8 for 10. So those two dominated, the 2 wide receivers dominated in this game. Theo Johnson, 4 receptions for 34 yards on 5 targets. Now, Tyrone Tracy came through on much better as far as a receiver with 4 catches for 36 yards on 5 targets. So he was the guy on the receiving game. Cameron Scatterbo did have 2 catches for 14 yards on 3 targets. So we'll see what happens there. Darius Slayton, 2 catches for 61 yards. And then Devin Singletary, I don't know what, he may not see much of the field. 1 reception for -4 yards. Now for Dallas, it was the tight end and CeeDee Lamb. But a big difference on the way these players are used. Jake Ferguson, tight end, had 9 catches for 78 yards, like an 8.67 yard average. He had 9 catches on 12 targets. CeeDee Lamb had 9 catches for 112 yards on 11 targets, but for a 12.44 yard average. So again, you're seeing the huge difference in the way the 2 teams throw the ball. Like I said, Giants want to throw it down the field to Neighbors and Robinson. But CeeDee Lamb did have a good game. Javonte Williams, like I said, good game. 6 catches for 33 yards on 7 targets. So Javonte Williams touched the ball 24 times in this game. Definitely somebody I'm going to be looking at. Now, George Pickens, who I thought would be the next best receiver, did have 5 catches for 68 yards and did get a touchdown. So that really salvaged his game. But he did have 9 targets. So he is being included in this game. I mean, for the Dallas Cowboys. So maybe it's just a little bit more on the timing and so forth between Prescott and Pickens, but 5 catches on 9 targets. So not too bad. Kevontae Turpin, 4 catches for 47 yards and 1 touchdown. Miles Sanders, 2 catches, 4 yards. Jalen Tolbert, 2 catches for 16. So really a big game by Ferguson and Lamb. And Javonte Williams, if you had him combining his running and receiving, really good game for him. All right, looking at the let me look at this. I'm looking at the kicking game here, which is what's slowing me down here. Right at the end of the game, Brandon Aubrey kicked a 64-yard field goal to win the game. So pretty impressive, 64 yards. He's got a powerful leg. All right, on defense, Giants had 3 sacks that they racked up in 1 interception. So not too bad. They tried to hang in there, but still was a high-scoring game. For Dallas, again, also same thing, 3 sacks and 1 interception. All right, that is that game. Dallas winning the game by a high score of 40-37. Next game, San Francisco 49ers at the New Orleans Saints. Now, San Francisco leads this series 51-27 with 2 ties. So big lead by San Francisco. They ended up winning this game in a close game, but it was in New Orleans, but the 49ers win it 26-21. So pretty close game. Let's get that game up here too. All right. Now looking at some of the numbers before we get into the game itself. For the Saints, Alvin Kamara is the guy. He continues to move up the board. He's now 6th all-time in receiving yards, not rushing, but receiving yards for the New Orleans Saints with 4,795. He passed Jimmy Graham in this game. He only had 21 yards, but it was enough to move into 6th place. Next up for him is in number 5 spot is Danny Abramovitz, who played in the late 60s, early 70s, who had 4,875. So he needs 80 yards to catch Danny Abramovitz for 5th place all time. And more Alvin Kamara. We'll just be watching him all the time. He had 6 catches in this game for only 21 yards, though. So not quite as effective as you'd like if you are a fan of his. But he moved into 7th all-time in receiving receptions, obviously receiving, for the Saints with 581. He passed Keith Byers to move into 7th place. Next up for him are several people, actually, including Marcus Allen, who had 587, Tiki Barber, Ronnie Harmon. All of those guys are within 6 of Alvin Kamara, so he could move as far as to 4th place for this team, and we'll just see how it goes. But he definitely is going to get there, whether it's next week or in 2 weeks. He'll be in 4th place by himself. And then looking at the 49ers, now this is NFL record, not just and that's what for Alvin Kamara, when I was talking about his 581 receptions, this is all time in the NFL. So he's, like I said, 7th all time in NFL, and next up for him is Marcus Allen, Tiki Barber, and Ronnie Harmon. Now, Christian McCaffrey's farther behind as far as total receptions, but he's coming up there as well, but he's still behind Alvin Kamara. But when it comes to touchdowns, he's right there now. He is tied for 3rd all-time in receiving touchdowns. He had one more in this game, so he's now has 30. There's 3 players, Austin Eckler, Brian Westbrook, and James Brooke, and now also Christian McCaffrey all have 30 receiving touchdowns as running backs. That's only 6 away from the record held by Marshall Faulk. So next up for Christian McCaffrey, and unfortunately, not Austin Eckler, but Christian McCaffrey now needs 2 to tie Darren Sproles. Austin Eckler's out for the season, so that's a really terrible break for him because he was also on this list of all-time receiving as far as touchdowns go. Tough break. All right, let's look at the game itself. Like I said, this is another close game. The 49ers pulled it out 26-21. Now, looking at the total numbers, like I said, it's a close game. I mean, first down, San Francisco 23, New Orleans 21. Total net yards, neither team was great. 344 for San Francisco, 307 for New Orleans. Rushing, only 77 yards for the 49ers, 121 yards for New Orleans. So they did a better game. But in the passing game, it was 267 yards for the 49ers and only 186 in net yards passing for the Saints. So that's kind of where the game was. They both quarterbacks sacked 3 times. Penalties weren't terrible. None of these, like the last game between the Giants and Dallas, 7 for 45 yards for New Orleans and 5 for 40 for San Francisco. Both of them had 2 fumbles, 1 loss. So a lot of turnovers here as far as that goes. Well, actually, only in the fumbles. There's nobody threw an interception. So that was good for the 2 quarterbacks. Big difference was, one of the bigger differences was San Francisco was able to complete 53% of their third down plays, 8 out of 15, versus only 36% for New Orleans, 4 out of 11. There's a big difference. Time of possession was pretty close, almost 31 minutes for San Francisco, just over 29 for New Orleans. So it was pretty close game all the way around. And even when you look at the quarterbacks, Mac Jones did not have a bad game filling in. He was 29 completions on 39 attempts for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. Really good. 3 sacks, and he had a quarterback rating of 113.1. So really a decent game for him. And Spencer Rattler's showing why he is the number one quarterback. 25 completions on 34 attempts for 207 yards, 3 touchdowns for him as well. Sacked 3 times, and he had a quarterback rating of 118.1. So they put up a good fight, the Saints did, for a team that a lot of people figure to be one of the worst in the NFL. But they just couldn't quite pull it out. Looking at the rushing game, despite the low yardage, it was Christian McCaffrey did have 13 carries for 55 yards for a 4.23 yard average. So he did hold up pretty well there. Brian Robinson did come in now for 6 carries for 20 yards. So he did have more carries than you might think. Mac Jones, 6 carries for 6 yards. And then Ricky Pearsall had 1 carry for -4. So like I said, only 26 carries. Well, they had 26 carries, which was quite a bit, but only 77 yards for a 2.96 yard average. Probably the better thing would have been just to continue to hand it off to Christian McCaffrey instead of Brian Robinson. Now for the Saints, Alvin Kamara had a really good game, and usually you don't see him in the rushing category so high, but he had 21 carries for 99 yards for a 4.71 in yard average. He had a long of 15 yards, so he really had a pretty good game here. Decent game. Spencer Rattler, 4 carries for 14 yards. And Kendre Miller had 5 carries for 8 yards. So Alvin Kamara, 21 rushes and 6 receptions. So he touched the ball 27 times in this game. Really, a lot of people sometimes doubt Kamara because of his age, but obviously the Saints think of him as a vital person on their team. Now, Christian McCaffrey, like I said, had 13 rushes. And in the receiving game, he led the 49ers with 6 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. So he touched the ball 19 times in this game. So dominated there. You really want somebody like McCaffrey to have at least 20. But last week, I think he had 31. So maybe they decided to tone it down a little bit. That was 6 catches on 7 targets for him. Now, Juwan Jennings came in second and really was the number one receiver here with 5 catches, 89 yards for 1 touchdown on 10 targets. So he dominated here in targets as far as the wide receivers go, because Ricky Pearsall had 4 catches for 56 yards on 6 targets. So like I said, Juwan Jennings, 5 out of 10 targets, and Ricky Pearsall, 4 out of 6. So the ball got spread around a little bit. Jake Tongas, 4 catches for 31 yards. Kendrick Bourne, 3 for 32. Luke Farrell had 2 catches for 15 yards. One of them was a touchdown. So the touchdowns went to McCaffrey, Juwan Jennings, and Luke Farrell. Brian Robinson did have 1 reception for -1 yards. All right. Now for the Saints, again, it was the running back who had dominated the receptions, but unfortunately not in the yardage. Alvin Kamara had 6 catches on 6 targets for only 21 yards. Chris Olave, 6 catches on 10 targets. So he was the leading wide receiver, but as far as targets go, but only 54 yards. Now, Juwan Jennings, the tight end, really showed up again. 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown on 9 targets. So he was targeted almost as much as Chris Olave. And a lot of people have been touting Rashid Shaheed, but still he's just not getting the number of looks as Chris Olave. He had 4 catches for 52 yards. I mean, he's numbers-wise, he's producing fairly well, but only 5 targets. So he only had half the targets Chris Olave did. Brandon Cooks had 2 catches for 26 yards. Devon Vele, 1 catch, 3 yards, but it was a touchdown. And then Kendre Miller had 1 catch for 2 yards. So it's really right now it's Kamara, Olave, and Johnson, the tight end. Each one are looked at the most on this team so far. All right, let's look at the defense real quick. Fred Warner had 11 total tackles, 7 solo, 4 assists. He dominated on that team for the 49ers. 49ers did have 3 sacks in this game, so they had a really good game. For the Saints, it was Demario Davis, also had 11 total tackles, 5 solo, 6 assists. So good game for him there. And they had 3 sacks as well. All right, now let's look at the quarterbacks. Wow, this is another game. Neither quarterback is throwing down the field. They're just trying to get rid of the ball. And I don't know, maybe this explains why, for the Saints, why Shaheed's not getting some passes. But balls over 30 yards for the Saints, 2 for 4 for 59 yards. That's it. If you add in 10 to 20 yards, they were 6 out of 12. But everything, the vast majority, in fact, not vast majority, well, all the receptions are to the left for Spencer Rattler when he's throwing longer passes. He was 0 for 2, anything up the middle or to the right. Now, on the other hand, Mac Jones didn't throw, or only threw 1 pass over 20 yards and was incomplete, but he did throw from 10 to 20 yards. He did have 9 completions on 14 attempts. So he is getting the ball down to the middle of the field and not just all these dump offs like 10 or less yards. So trying to push it down the field much more than Rattler did in this game. All right. Let's move on to the next game. So that game, 49ers won 26-21. All right. Next game up, Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. This is a game which I really didn't do prognosticating very well on. I actually thought there was a possibility that the Jets could win this game after the game the Buffalo had the week before, and such a tough game, and it was in New York, but that was not the case, not even close. The Bills won this game 30-10, and now the Buffalo Bills lead the series 72 wins to 58 losses. So they dominated. It wasn't close. Really, there's no stats in this game to look at overall as far as all-time numbers for the team or the NFL, at least not yet. So we'll move to the game itself. Like I said, total domination by Buffalo. First downs for Buffalo, 25, 11 for the Jets. Total net yards, 403 for the Buffalo, 154 for the Jets. In the rushing game, Buffalo had 224 yards rushing to 100 for the Jets. So total net yards, 154. Net yards rushing, 100. So they're only 54 net yards passing for the Jets. Now for Buffalo, they had 179 net yards passing. And obviously for Allen, he didn't have to throw the ball nearly as much because it was a completely different game script for them. It was, like I said, dominated by Buffalo in every way. Third downs, not too good for Buffalo, 5 out of 14 for 35%, but much better than the New York Jets, who were 0 out of 11 attempts on third downs for 0%. Now, they did go for it 3 more times on fourth down and did make it every time, but really a terrible third down percentage for them. Total plays for Buffalo, 71, for the Jets, 47. Like I said, it's complete domination. In the last category, time of possession, over 38 minutes for Buffalo, less than 22 for the Jets. Just a romp. Justin Fields didn't last long in this game. 3 completions on 11 attempts for 27 yards. He was sacked twice, had a quarterback rating of 39.6. Tyrod Taylor came in after that and was 7 for 11 for 56 yards, 1 touchdown. He was also sacked twice, but he did have a quarterback rating of 106.6. But by then, in this game, it was pretty much over. Halftime, it was already 20-3, and In fact, after the third quarter, it was 23-3. So it really, the touchdown, it was not against top notch, and the defense for Buffalo was playing a little differently. Now in the running game before I get to the running game, let's look at these quarterbacks. There's really nothing to say. Now, Josh Allen just doesn't throw the ball down the field. He had no passes over 20 yards, 0 passes over 20 yards. Now, he didn't really have to. They had a great running game, so maybe there was just no need. He did throw the ball between 10 and 20 yards, 3 out of 7 in that department. But really, there was only 14 completions in the game, so he didn't have – his numbers weren't that great, 14 for 25 for 148 yards. Not too impressive, honestly. But again, he didn't have to be great. And Tyrod Taylor, which you'd think they'd be going down the field a little bit more, but they were 1 for 3 on passes over 10 yards, 0 for 2 over 20 yards. So really only one completion of a pass over 10 yards for him. He only had 7 completions himself. So just a rough game for him. And Allen did what he needed to do to win this game. He didn't have to do a lot in the passing game, so which probably worked for him after the game they had last week. Now in the running game, it was James Cook, 21 carries for 132 yards, 6.3 yard average. He had a 44-yard touchdown run, so big game for him. He had 2 touchdowns. He had a lot. He was 16 touchdowns last year he had, so he's on his way again to posting some number near that possibly. Now, Josh Allen, 6 rushes for 59 yards. No touchdowns in this game for him. Ramon Davis had 9 carries for 24 yards, only a 2.7 yard average. Ty Johnson, 2 carries for 6. So Mitch Trubinsky even came into this game by the fourth quarter. He was 1 for 2 in the passing game for 32 yards, and he had 3 carries for -3 yards. So just came in to run the clock out, basically. Unfortunately for New York Jets, Justin Fields, who didn't play much in this game, but 5 carries for 49 yards, led the team in rushing department. 1 was for 27 yards. Breece Hall, 10 carries, 29 yards. What a disappointment there. Last week, over 100 yards. This week, 29. Just we'll have to see, is it defense? Is it just the game script with Fields out that there was no need to worry too much about Tyrod Taylor, even though Tyrod Taylor can run around, but nothing like Fields. Taylor was 3 carries for 21 yards. Braylon Allen, 2 carries for 11. So Breece Hall is the guy, but it was a horrible game. Like I said, 10 carries for him. In the receiving game for him, he had two catches also, but his game was shot. If you had him in your starting lineup, really hurt you. In the receiving game for Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid led the team with 4 catches for 37 yards on 6 targets. Now, Keon Coleman, who was a big star last week, if you put him in your lineup, you hated it. 3 catches, 26 yards, no touchdowns, only targeted 3 times. Caught them all, but only targeted 3 times. So rough game. Another reason why you may not want to be starting Kincaid is because Dawson Knox also had 2 catches for 19 yards on 5 targets. So they almost targeted evenly. No touchdowns for any receivers. Josh Palmer, 2 catches for 47 yards, and then a few with 1 catch. So Khalil Shakir, just not worth it. 1 catch, 12 yards. James Cook, 1 catch for 3 yards. So he did touch the ball a total of 22 times, which is really good. Not used much in the passing game, but again, the game was over by halftime, basically. So they wound it down as far as the passing game went. For the Jets, it was Garrett Wilson. Dominated, but it wasn't any help. 4 catches, 50 yards on 8 targets, so 4 out of 8. He's the guy, but now with the quarterback situation, it's just going to be hard for you to count on him. Breece Hall, 2 catches for 9 yards, several players with one catch. So only 10 receptions in the entire game, despite the fact that they were behind in this game the entire game. It's a rough game for them. Now, looking at the defense for Buffalo, 4 sacks in this game they had. No one really stood out. No one had more than a total of 5 tackles. I mean, Cole Bishop, Matt Milano had a total of 5, 4 solo, 1 assist for Cole Bishop, 2 solos, and 3 assists for Matt Milano. That's the high. I mean, there was no one person standing out, just a bunch of people all putting in some decent numbers. On the other hand, for the Jets, Jamie Sherwood had 13 total tackles, 6 solo, 7 assists. So he dominated on that side for them. Quincy Williams, no sacks for him. He's one of their sack leaders, but didn't have a sack. He did have 1 solo tackle for 4 assists. And Quinnen Williams, another one of their leading sackers in the history of the top 10 anyway, for the Jets, only had 2 tackles in this game, 2 solo tackles. So they were able to sack the quarterback only 1 time in this game. All right. So that was the domination by the by the Bills, winning that game 30-10. Next game is New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. That game was crazy. New England wins this game in Miami 33-27. Quite a game. Another one of those barn burner type games. Close game all the way. Halftime, the Patriots led it 15-14 and ended up pulling it out in the fourth quarter 33-27. Pretty impressive game overall for New England. I did not expect them to come down there and win, to be honest with you. But they did. So now Miami leads this series 64 wins to 56 losses. So rack one up for the Patriots there. All time now, there's only one stat to look at, and this is for the Miami Dolphins in their top 10 all-time receiving yards. Tyreek Hill moved into 7th all-time by himself with 4,617 yards. He had a good game here, 109 yards in this game to push him over Duriel Harris, who was in 8th, or who was in 7th, and now has Tyreek Hill has 7th. Next up for him is Devontae Parker, who retired only 4 years ago, but he had 4,727. So he needs 110 yards, which he almost got this last game, to catch Devontae Parker for the all-time to move into 6th all-time. All right, let's look at the game. This was a close game. New England, total net yards 333, Miami 358, so pretty close. But in the running game, New England dominated here, 122 net yards rushing to only 61 for Miami. In the passing game, it flip-flopped there with New England having 211 net yards to 297 for Miami. We'll look at the quarterbacks here in just a second. Penalties were a problem for both teams, 10 for 65 for Miami and 12 penalties for 75 yards for New England. Where New England was able to really help them win this game was the fact that in third downs, they were 7 out of 12 for 58%, and they did go for it on fourth down once, and they did make it. So they were able to hang on to this ball and really held dominating time of possession is probably too strong, but they did have a good, solid lead in the game here as far as time of possession, with 33 minutes and 45 seconds to 26 minutes and 15 seconds for Miami. So had the ball for 7.5 more minutes than Miami did. All right, now looking at the quarterbacks, Drake May, 19 completions on 23 attempts for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns for 137.3 quarterback rating. He was sacked 3 times, but that's really quite a game. I mean, very good with handling the ball and controlling it. Now for Tua Tagovailoa, 26 completions on 32 attempts for 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 1 interceptions, and he was sacked 5 times. But he did have a quarterback rating of 115.5. So he had a decent game, but that interception hurt, and the 5 sacks hurt as well. Now, looking at the quarterbacks and where they're throwing this ball, again, Drake May, and it's just the receivers. They need some receivers who can get down the field, and right now they don't really have it. Only 1 pass over 20 yards, and it was a completion for 55 yards. But otherwise, passes between 10 and 20 yards, he was 3 out of 4. So most of his passes were under 10 yards. But looking at Miami, one of the problems that Miami's been having is all the dump-offs. They were able to get the ball down the field a little bit here. In fact, they were 3 out of 5 on passes over 20 yards, which is something they've been having a problem with before. So that's a good sign for Tua. And then passes between 10 and 20 yards, they were 4 out of 5. So really a good game as far as passes over 10 yards for Tua. Just the interception hurt. And that was a pass between 10 and 20 yards when he threw it up the middle and it was intercepted. So those are your 2 quarterbacks and just the difference in how they manage their game. And, you expect it. Drake May, maybe we'll see him get down the field more as he gets more comfortable. Now, in the running game, if you're like me and you thought at some point Travion Henderson's going to be the guy, well, if he is, it's not for a while. For New England Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, 11 carries for 54 yards, 4.9 yard average, really dominated as far as the carries go with Drake May, who ran it 10 times himself. They had a total of 21 carries, and Drake May and Stevenson had 21 of them. But he was 10 for 31. And then, in fact, Antonio Gibson was 5 for 27. Travion Henderson was only 3 for 10. So he wasn't even the second running back coming off the bench. It was Gibson. So we have a while to wait to see if Henderson can get on the field and be the main guy. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Stevenson. For Miami, it was Devon Achane, 11 carries for 30 yards, not good at all, 2.73 yard carry average. Malik Washington had 3 carries for 23 yards, and Ollie Gordon, who you thought you might see a little bit more than this, but 1 carry for 8 yards. So only 15 carries in the game for Miami, and Devon had 11 of them, but only 30 yards for him. Now in the passing game, again, it's Stevenson, 5 catches for 88 yards. So he's the guy. I mean, he's definitely showing he can be the guy, and he's not going to give up the mantle to Henderson anytime soon. But he had 5 catches, 88 yards on 5 targets. Now, one of the catches was 55 yards, so he's still showing he's got some speed as well. After that, no one had more than 5 targets for the Patriots, and it was Stephon Diggs was 4 out of 5, 4 receptions on 5 targets, but only 32 yards. And his long was 10, so he's not really getting down the field. Austin Hooper, 3 catches for 38 yards on 3 targets. Like I said, May was very efficient with his passes. And then Travion Henderson did have 2 catches for 30 yards on 2 targets. Somebody I was watching was Kayshon Boutte, but he only had 1 catch for 16 yards, but it was a touchdown. So if you did pick him up on the chance that he would be the number 1 guy, at least he did get the touchdown pass, which saved his game there. After that, Hunter Henry only 1 catch for 9 yards. And Demarion Douglas is just not proven. There was a lot of thought that he could be at least the number 2 wide receiver, but it doesn't look like it at all. In fact, it's between Diggs and Boutte, but right now it's Diggs as far as wide receivers go. And they're honestly looking at the running backs more. I mean, 7 of his passes were completed to running backs. So actually 8 of them, make that 8. 8 out of the 19 completions were to running backs. Now looking at Miami, this is what, say, if you have a chain, which you probably do, if you're going to have him as your number one running back, 11 carries for 30 yards, but he did have 8 catches. So he did touch the ball 19 times. And in the passing game is where he did well. So really saved his game there. 8 catches on 10 targets. He led Miami in as far as targets and receptions. 8 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. So great game as far for him in the passing game. Now Tyreek Hill also had a good game and was very efficient. 6 catches on 7 targets for 109 yards. One was 47 yards. So he had a good game. Jalen Waddle had a good game, 5 catches on 6 targets for 68 yards and a touchdown. He did have the touchdown. So those 3 players dominated in this game in targets. I mean, 32 targets and 23 of them went to those 3 players. After that, it was just a couple, one for everybody. Alec Ingold had 2 for 13. Nick Westbrook had 2 for 18. So really those 3 players. Looking at the defense, no one stood out too much as far as total tackles for New England. They had 5 sacks, though, which is really good. Milton Williams had 2 sacks in this game. Good game for him. And then Marte Mapu had the interception for the Patriots. As far as Miami goes, they did have 3 sacks in this game. So that was not too bad for them. And Tyrell Dotson had 6 solo tackles, 3 assists for 9 total. So the Patriots end up winning this game 33-27 in a very close game. Next game up, Seattle Seahawks at Pittsburgh Steelers. Another game, interesting game. Honestly, I did not expect, I guess, that this would be the score. And for this game, I thought the Steelers would maybe hold Seattle, especially since the game was in Pittsburgh. And now we start to have to question the Steelers' defense. I mean, they gave up way too much to the Seattle Seahawks. But the Seahawks dominated 31-17 in this game. And now the series between Pittsburgh and Seattle is tied up at 11 games apiece. So 11 wins for each team. Now in this game, we had some numbers to look at. Kenneth Walker, who we didn't know if to put him on the heap trash pile or not, but he had a good game. He moved into 10th all-time in Seahawks history in rushing yards. He now has 2,653 past Maurice Morris to move into 10th all-time. Next up for him, probably be late in the season if he can get there, is Sherman Smith, who had 3,429. So he needs, almost 800 yards. So it'll be, if he does make it, it'd be at the end of the season, toward the end. He could, though. Now, again, Kenneth Walker, as far as touchdowns go, Harry's moved up the list a little bit. He's number 6th all-time with 25. Next up for him is Sherman Smith again, who has 28. But he moved into the 6th spot all-time as far as that goes. On defense, Jaron Reed, the defensive tackle, was 10th. Now he's tied for 9th all-time in tackles for loss for the Seattle Seahawks with only 35, but he is 9th. Tied Frank Clark in that number, who just retired a couple years ago. And, or it's not on the team a couple years ago, but Anthony Simmons is next for him, who has 39 tackles for loss for Jaron Reed to move into 8th. Now for the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers is tied with Brett Favre now with 508 passing TDs, tied for 4th all-time in NFL history. Next up, which Not sure he'll make this. We'll see, because he still needs 31 touchdown passes. But number 3 all-time is Peyton Manning with 539 touchdown passes. So Aaron Rodgers, that's the next player up for him. All right, let's look at the game. Like I said, Seahawks win this 31-17. Now, this was Pittsburgh had this game at halftime. They were winning 14-7. And then even after the third quarter was tied up 14-14. But Seattle came strong in the fourth quarter with 17 points just in the fourth quarter alone to pull this game out. All right, let's look at the numbers. And Seattle really showed they kind of dominated here. First down, Seattle 21, Pittsburgh 13. Total net yards, 395 for Seattle. This is against Pittsburgh defense, which people thought was one of the better ones. Pittsburgh had 267 total net yards. On the ground, Seattle had 117 net yards rushing. Pittsburgh only had 72. In the passing game, Seattle had 278 net yards passing, and Pittsburgh had only 195 net yards passing. Looking at the other numbers in this game, it was fairly close. Seattle had the ball for over 31 minutes to less than 29 for Pittsburgh. All right, let's look at the quarterbacks in this game. You know, I was curious how Sam Darnold would do after leaving Minnesota. He had a good game. Not great, but he had a decent game. He was 22 completions on 33 attempts for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions as well. And he was sacked 2 times for a quarterback rating of 89.8. Those interceptions really hurt his numbers. On the other hand, Aaron Rodgers did not have a good game, especially compared to what he did last week. 18 completions on 33 attempts for only 203 yards, 1 touchdown, but he had 2 interceptions and was sacked 3 times. So he just did not have that great of a game. Looking at the quarterbacks in this game and their passing distribution, Sam Darnold did have 2 out of 3 passes over 20 yards. 1 was a TD. And then he did have another 4 out of 7 from passes 10 to 20 yards. So not too bad. I mean, 6 of his completions out of 22 were over 10 yards. Now, on the other hand, Aaron Rodgers, on his 18 completions, did try to throw it more than 20 yards 4 times, but only had 1 completion, and he did have 1 interception as well. So not impressive on passes over 20 yards. And even passes 10 to 20 yards, he was only 1 out of 5. So he just could not get the ball down the field at all. Really, his passing was not too good in this game. All right. Like I said, he only had a quarterback rating of 58 in this game. Rough game for him. Now, Kenneth Walker, this game is interesting because unlike last week where Charbonnet was the standout, it was Walker. Even though Walker had 13 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown, and Charbonnet actually out-touched him, 15 carries, but only 10 yards for a .67 yard average. And in fact, 1 carry was 6 yards, so he actually had 14 carries for 4 yards. That's terrible. While Kenneth Walker averaged over 8 yards a carry. So he really had a good game. And one of his long was 20 yards, so he still was 12 out of 85. So that's still a good average if you take out the 20-yarder. Still, he really had a good game. Now, for Pittsburgh, it was Jaylen Warren dominated, and it was no way to know after last week how much Kenny Gainwell was going to play, but Jaylen Warren had 14 carries for 48 yards for a 3.43 average. Kenny Gainwell had 5 carries for 20 yards. But one of them was 13 yards, so he would have been 4 carries for 7 yards on the other ones. Warren's longest carry was only 9 yards. So nothing special as far as Pittsburgh goes in the running game. Even though Jaylen Warren, they probably could have thought about giving him the ball even a little bit more when the game was still close. Now, for Seattle in the receiving game, it was Jackson Smith-Njigba. 8 receptions on 10 targets for 103 yards. Really a huge game for him. And very exciting and you can probably pick up Cooper Kupp if you're interested. After last week, you thought he could be done, but this week, 7 catches on 9 targets for 90 yards. Really had a good game. So he's somebody to look at. In fact, those two dominated. No one else had more than 4 targets. That was Torrey Horton, had 2 for 32 on 4 targets. Coming out of the backfield, Kenneth Walker did have 1 catch for 13 yards. So Kenneth Walker ended up touching the ball 14 times and had a really good game for Seattle. So if you're interested, Cooper Kupp may be an option. Really, there's no other receivers that he's throwing to. It was just those 2. So tight end had 2 catches. Barner had only 2 catches for 26 yards, but he did have a touchdown. So he stole he had one of the 2 touchdowns. So despite the yardage Kupp and Njigba had, they did not have any touchdowns, unfortunately. Now for Steelers, it was Jonnu Smith, their tight end, who had 4 receptions for 27 yards on 4 targets. No one dominated in this game. And really, Metcalf's the one you want, but his game was saved by he did have a touchdown. But he only had 3 catches on 6 targets for 3 catches, 20 yards, but he did have a touchdown. So there was nobody that stood out in this game. The passing went all around on the 20. No one had more than 4 catches. That was Jonnu Smith and Jaylen Warren, the running back. So 4 catches for 86 yards. Huge. He had a 65-yard touchdown. Not touchdown, but a 65-yard pass play. So big game for him in the receiving department. So that helped him out. So he ended up touching this ball 20 times in this game. So big game for him there. Make that not 20, make that 18. Still decent amount, which might explain why he might have been on the sideline a little bit for Kenny Gainwell to come in for his 5 while he rested after that long 65-yard play. Tight end, the other tight end, Pat Freiermuth, had 3 catches for 31 yards. So if you want to look at it in any particular way, the tight ends had 7 catches out of the total 20 completions, and they had 7 out of 8 targets. So tight end was looked at quite a bit, but you don't want to take either one if they're going to be splitting the receptions. And then out of the backfield, Kenny Gainwell had 3 catches for 16. So it was either the tight ends or the running backs dominated in this game, with 14 out of the 20 receptions were by a tight end or running back. And then Metcalf had 3 for 20. Calvin Austin, who some people were looking at, I wouldn't think so, only 1 catch for 22 yards. So nothing too impressive for them there. Tough loss for Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. We'll have to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers and if he can make a nice comeback. For Seattle on defense, Ernest Jones, 8 solo tackles. That's impressive. 2 assists for 10 total. Byron Murphy had 1.5 sacks in this game, so he had a good game as far as that goes. Kobe Bryant had an interception. 1 interception, went for 28 yards on the return. So big game for him as well. And they sacked the quarterback a total of 3 times. Now for Pittsburgh, well, it's a little disappointing, really. Peyton Wilson had a good game, 8 solo tackles, 2 assists for 10. Jalen Ramsey did have an interception in this game, and he did have 6 tackles as well, 4 solo and 2 assists. So he had a decent game. Cameron Hayward, who's been trying to move up the board, did have a decent game. No sacks, though. He had 2 solo tackles, 3 assists for 5 total. TJ Watt really didn't have that good of a game for him. Only 4 total tackles, 2 solo, 2 assists. So they really did a good job, Seattle that is, on containing Watt and keeping him away from the quarterback. All right, so Seattle wins this game 31-17. All right, we got to move a little quicker here. Chicago Bears at Detroit Lions. Wow, what a game. This game was 52 for Detroit and 21 for Chicago. Really dominated here by Detroit. Now, Chicago still leads the series 105 wins to 81 now for the Lions with 5 ties. In this game, it was really Detroit all the way. Never scored less than 10 points in a quarter. We're leading already at halftime 28-14 and just stuffed Chicago the rest of the way. Chicago was able to get a touchdown in the fourth quarter, but by then it was long over. All right, let's look at the numbers in this game. Detroit, 25 first downs to 19 for Chicago. Detroit had 511 total net yards to 339 for Chicago. Now, Chicago did rush for 134 yards net. Detroit had 177 net yards rushing. Big game there. And a big game in the passing department with 334 net yards passing to 205 passing net yards for Chicago. Penalties hurt Chicago, 8 for 50, and they lost 1 fumble. They had 2 fumbles, lost 1 of them. Rough game there. They did all right on third down, 7 out of 13 for 53%. And the game was actually close as far as time possession. They both almost split in half, 30 minutes apiece. It was pretty close to that, 20-second difference each way. Now, looking at the quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, 19 completions on 30 attempts for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. He was sacked 4 times again. He's just going to be sacked a lot if you go look at last year. He had a quarterback rating of 91.9, while Jared Goff had almost a perfect game. 23 completions on 28 attempts for 334 yards, almost a 12 yards per attempt average. 5 touchdown passes, incredible, for 156.0 quarterback rating. That is quite a game for Jared Goff. Looking at the running backs, DeAndre Swift, 12 carries for 63 yards, 5.25 yards, and he did have a touchdown. Kyle Monangwe had 7 carries for 28 yards. Caleb Williams, trying to go too fast here. Caleb Williams, 5 carries for 27 yards, 5.4 average. And those were your top ones. Looking at the running game for Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs, 12 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. So good game for him. And David Montgomery also had a good game, 11 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. So they both had a touchdown. Really a good game by those two. Looking at the wide receivers and other receivers. This was a big game for the Bears. Rome Odunze, 7 catches on 11 targets for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. So really big game for him. And the question is it likely that he may now be the number 1 receiver for the Bears over DJ Moore, who had 5 catches for 46 yards and on 6 targets? Romo's really just a much more dynamic player, but Moore's a good route runner and dependable, but Odunze really had a huge game here. We'll see how it goes as we go. Now, DeAndre Swift also had 3 catches for 6 yards, so he ended up touching the ball 15 times in this game. Not bad if he's, like, say, your second running back on your fantasy team. Those are the top players as far as receiving goes. Zacchaeus had 2 catches for 12 for yards, but on 5 targets. So only 2 catches on 5 targets. No one else had more than 3 targets in the game. And one more player, Colston Loveland, their tight end, one of their tight ends, is not the guy. He's not overtaking Cole Kmet. Colston Loveland had no receptions in the game. He was targeted 1 time. And Cole Kmet had 2 catches for 29 yards on 2 targets. So the tight ends weren't even really targeted much, but Loveland, no receptions. So he's somebody you might want to just get rid of. Even if Kmet's there, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference as far as the passing game goes. Now for Detroit, St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown had the big game. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it was the St. Brown Odunze game here. Jahmyr Gibbs, coming out of the backfield, did have 3 catches for 10 yards. So he had a big game. He ended up touching the ball 15 times as well in this game. Sam Laporta, the tight end, had 3 catches for 26 yards. So rough game for him. Now, Jameson Williams, I don't know what to think. I mean, it looks good in the stats. 2 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown. Only 4 targets, though. So do you want to trust that? I don't know. I don't like it. I mean, you're counting on a boom or bust type player here, but maybe so. David Montgomery had 1 catch for 4 yards. All right. That is that game. Let's look at the defense real quick. No one really stood out for Chicago Bears on defense too much. No sacks for them, no interceptions. So, which kind of expect when a team scores 52 points. Now for the Detroit Lions, they did sack the quarterback 4 times, like I mentioned, and pretty good game for them. And they did have an interception as well. All right, so Chicago Bears lose this game to the Lions, 52-21. Next game, Jacksonville Jaguars at the Cincinnati Bengals. This was a terrible game if you're a Jaguar fan. Led the game, the entire game, until the last 18 seconds. And they lose to the Bengals in Cincinnati, 31-27. It was just very difficult to even fathom when Burrows went out and the quarterback was Browning, and he looked like he was even better than Burrows. He did throw 3 interceptions, and somehow the Bengals still won. It was terrible. The end there, they went down the field for 92 yards, at least 92 yards, and scored a winning touchdown. It was a rough game to watch. And now this series between the two teams is tied at 13 wins apiece. So in this game, T. Higgins moved into a tie for 10th all-time in pass receiving touchdowns with 35. He tied Bob Trumpy, who played in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Next up for him are Chris Collinsworth and Darnay Scott, who each have 36 touchdown receptions. So he's moving up the list there. Trey Hendrickson's moving up the list as far as tackles for loss. Had 1 in this game. And Trey Hendrickson had a couple of plays, but the offensive line for the Jaguars held him off fairly well. But he did have a tackle for loss, which ties him for 4th all-time with Sam Hubbard and Justin Smith with 55 tackles for loss. Next up for him is Michael Johnson, who had 60 in that category. For the Jaguars, Trayvon Walker had a sack to move into 9th all-time with 25 sacks for the Jaguars. He passed Dwayne Smoot, who's also on the team, who now has 24 and a half. And that's it for players for that. We'll look at the game. Like I said, the Jaguars dominated for most of the game until the end, which is where it matters. Jaguars had 400 total net yards, 350 for Cincinnati. In the running game, Jaguars had another good game, 139 net yards rushing to only held Cincinnati to 48 yards, net yards rushing. Passing game, 261 net passing yards for Jacksonville, 302 for Cincinnati. Penalties. Only this is deceiving. Jacksonville had 6 penalties for 55 yards. That doesn't count how many penalties that the Bengals decided not to take. The illegal motions and illegal formations killed the Jaguars. It's crazy. And the big penalty on 4th down on this last drive on Travis Hunter. At being a fan, I will be nice and just call it questionable. But it was a penalty that saved Cincinnati and helped them end up winning the game. All right, looking at the quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, 24 completions on 42 attempts for 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and he was sacked only 1 time for a quarterback rating of 80.6. The problem with these numbers is 1 interception was on Trevor Lawrence. He was pressured by Hendrickson. He kind of threw it in the end zone. It was a terrible play on his part, and it was underthrown, and it was intercepted. The other one was on Byron Thomas, who decided he did not want to get hit, pulled his arm back, and the ball went by Thomas and was intercepted by the player behind him. Terrible interception. It gets credited to Trevor Lawrence, but that was not on him. 42, he only had 24 completions. He had numerous drops, and some of them were by Thomas. Jaguars are going to, I think, have a long talk with Thomas, and I don't know what's going to happen there. Now, for Cincinnati, Joe Burrow was not in the game long before he got injured and was out, unfortunately, for the Bengals. It looks like he's going to be out at least maybe 3 months. He had 7 completions on 13 attempts. He was being harassed quite a bit. He had already been sacked 2 times, and it was on a sack that he got hurt. He had a quarterback rating of 97 because he did have a touchdown pass in that. Jake Browning came in, had 21 completions on 32 attempts for 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He was sacked once, only had a quarterback rating of 69.9, and somehow he was able to beat the Jaguars. It's a tough loss for the Jaguars. Rushing game, Etienne had a good game again. Not as good as last week, but 14 carries for 71 yards, 5.07 yards average. Bashan Tootin had a good game as well, 8 carries for 42 yards for a 5.25 yard average. And then LaQuinton Allen had 2 carries for 13 yards. So the running backs were good in this game. Why they didn't want to run the ball more when they were leading the entire game until the last 18 seconds, instead of passing it 42 times, I don't know. They didn't have to pass it 42 times when they're winning like that. And really, the idea was, I thought the running game was something they wanted to push out there, and they have a good running game, it looks like, but didn't do it. Now for Cincinnati, Chase Brown, 16 carries, only 47 yards for a 2.94 yard average. They really held Chase Browning in check. In the passing game, no one really stood out too much. No one had more. They tried to get the ball to Brian Thomas, 4 catches, 49 yards, but they threw the ball to him 12 times. Honestly, he should have been benched by halftime. There was some plays, not just the one where he had alligator arm there, but his lack of effort seemed to be noticeable. I'm sitting in watching my TV. I can't believe how he played. Diami Brown had 5 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. Nice catch there. He had another touchdown right in his hands. He dropped. This would have also made a big difference in this game. Just perfect pass into his hands, and he dropped it. Parker Washington had 5 catches for 76 yards. Good game for him. Travis Hunter had 3 catches for 22 yards on 6 targets. He dropped a pass as well. Brenton Strange, who I wish they would have, like I said, benched Brian Thomas and maybe focused a little more on Strange, had 3 catches for 17 yards on 5 targets. Travis Etienne had another couple of catches for 18 yards and a touchdown. Nice play on 3 targets. So Travis Etienne ended up touching the ball 16 times in this game. And Bashan Tutin also had 2 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. Nice. He's so fast. His from stop to start, from dead stop to a dead run is so fast. He's really going to be impressive. All right. Looking at the receiving, this was Jamar Chase game here. T. Higgins did have 3 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown, and he did get open, but Jamar Chase was unstoppable. 14 receptions on 16 targets, and he had 1 touchdown, 165 yards. The Jaguars defense had no answer for him, and to continue to try to single man cover Chase is ridiculous. He was just open all the time, just about. He really had more than over half of the yardage for the Bengals as far as receiving goes. Is that what the entire game? His long catch was only 25 yards. So it just shows he was just catching ball after ball after ball. Like I said, T. Higgins had 3 catches on 8 targets. So only 3 for 8. But one of them was, unfortunately, a 42-yard bomb for a touchdown. That one was an all-out blitz on Browning, and he just threw the ball up, and T. Higgins was able to get by, I believe it was, unfortunately, Travis Hunter for that touchdown. Mike Gesicki, the tight end, and Noah Fant each had 3 catches. So 6 of their receptions went to the tight ends there as well. All right, that's a wrap for that game. Like I said, that was a horrible game. Jaguars were able to sack the quarterback 3 times, intercepted the quarterback 3 times, and still lost the game. Just horrible. I can't even get over how horrible it was to lose that way. The Bengals, no one really stood out too much. They did a good job on Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson had 2 solo tackles, 1 assist for 3 total. He did have a quarterback sack, though, and he did have that pressure that caused the interception. So, he did show up, but considering how great he is, the Jaguars held him off pretty well in this game. All right, that is a wrap for the games. That was a long episode, but I wanted to get in those games because I'll have more tonight. After we watch the Monday night games, I'll have the rest of the Sunday games and then the 2 Monday night games. So I hope you enjoy watching the Monday night games. 2 of them, like I said, back to back. If you're on the East Coast like me, that means staying up till at least 1 o'clock in the morning if you want to watch them, unless you want to just tape them and watch them later. But anyway, enjoy the games tonight. I appreciate it if you like and subscribe to this podcast. You can find it on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL, also at all your podcast outlets, Apple, Spotify, and any other one. If you don't find it, let me know and I can get it on there. Also, email me at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com. I appreciate you listening. And that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL.